This took place in Wilmington, North Carolina when I was probably around 9 or 10 years old. My sister had been in a relationship for a few years and was married to my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law is an ex-Marine and had gotten out of the Corps and decided civilian life wasn't for him, so he re-enlisted in the Army. During his year of civilian life, they had started renting a duplex in a cul-de-sac. I was over there every other weekend to help my sister distract my nephews, while my sister worked or stayed over for the weekend. Whenever I was over there, I never saw this lady who I'm about to speak of in this neighborhood. But back to the story. My brother-in-law had re-enlisted and was getting ready to get shipped off to MOS training, and of course, they were moving in with me and my parents. So, a month or so after they moved in with us, my sister wasn't getting her mail to our house, so while we were getting lunch one day, we were going by the neighborhood and just decided to drop in to retrieve her mail. And after we retrieved her mail, she called the post office to remind them about the address change. During this time, somebody approached the front passenger side door while I was watching YouTube and proceeded to knock on the window. I obviously got scared and saw an old lady in a pink jacket wearing a straw hat, kind of like the ones you see in Walmart. And keep in mind, this was the middle of summer on the coast, so it was hot as hell, so why was she wearing a jacket? My sister rolled down the window, and the lady asked why she was grabbing the mail, and my sister explained she was a former resident, and then they engaged in a 15-minute conversation. During the entire conversation, I felt uncomfortable, like something was just off about her. My oldest nephew was in his car seat, sat behind me, when the lady looked at me and my nephew. She then began talking about how we look so alike and look like her grandkids, and how she takes her grandkids on vacations every year. She also mentioned how she bought her hat from the Bahamas, and again, it looked like a Walmart brand straw hat. She then proceeded to ask an absolutely dumbfounding question if I would like to be her grandkid, which just creeped me out. My sister at this point was uncomfortable as well, and made an excuse for us to get going, and the lady walked off before my sister rolled up the window. As we were turning around, we got to the middle of the cul-de-sac before me and my sister noticed the lady full sprinting at us. My sister, of course, did a massive burnout and raced out of the neighborhood. My sister said she was holding something, but I never asked what it was. I'm pretty sure my sister doesn't actually remember it. The only reason I remember this was because of the woman's face when she came up to my window. It genuinely scared me. At the time of me writing this, I was reading scary stories and remembered I had one of my own. I don't know if this lady had the intention of taking me and my nephew, or killing us, or whatever she had planned, but I never want to find out what she wanted to do. I no longer live in Wilmington anymore, but I'm sure I will never go back to that neighborhood again. Here's a bit of a short story. During the holiday season of 2022, I took a trip to visit my older sister. With every room already claimed by other family members, I found myself sleeping on the living room couch. Our nightly routine involved gathering in the living room for a movie before everyone went to bed for the night. My niece had set up a cot that she would use to relax and eventually fall asleep on. Then my sister would carry her to her bedroom when it was time for bed. One night, I woke up at around 3 a.m. to use the restroom and saw my younger sister fast asleep on the carpet beside me. To my surprise, my niece was also in the living room and in her cot, which I found strange since my older sister usually carried her to her bedroom before turning in for the night. I didn't think much of it and then decided to make a quick trip to the restroom. Upon returning a minute later, I found it odd that the cot was completely empty. I assumed my niece might have heard me getting up and went to my sister's room. The following morning, I inquired to my sister on why she had left my niece to sleep in the living room. My sister appeared confused, insisting she had carried her to bed as usual like she had done every night since I had arrived. I distinctly recalled seeing my niece in her cot during my 3 a.m. awakening, and doing a double take because I found it odd that she was still out there with me. This has left me wondering, did I see a ghost? I have a story that'll stick with me forever and bolster my curiosity. This took place back in 2010 when I was 16 years old. My two friends, my little brother, and I were living in a brand new neighborhood. My family moved into a fully furnished model home, and my friends lived in the next model home over. There were only about 10 houses built in the entire neighborhood, leaving it very dark with limited lighting. But we still had a rather large park at the very end of our street. About a mile after the park was an elementary school that we would frequently walk to and hop the fence to play some basketball on the court. One night, my brother, my two friends, and I decided to take a walk to this school. It was about 8 p.m. and already dark outside. We played some basketball and trekked back towards the park to go home. To set the scene, there was a very long and dark road from the school to the park with absolutely no lights. This gave it a very creepy vibe. When you first hit the park's sidewalk, there sits a metal bench with one street lamp above it shining down. We got to the park's long and curvy sidewalk and stopped dead in our tracks. Keep in mind, our neighborhood is very secluded. We knew the faces and structure of everybody who lived there. So here we are at about 10 p.m., staring directly at the bench with the light beaming down on it. The light beaming down on a dark figure. A lady dressed in complete black with a hooded trench coat covering half of her face. She was crouched over, making it seem as if she was older. No book, no cell phone, nothing. Just sitting there at the complete end of the night. She turned her face to us, but we still couldn't see her with all the shadowing. What happened next freaked us out. She turned back to face forward and slowly stood up straight, so damn slowly it was almost unrecognizable, and started walking kind of sideways towards us. We were still about 15 to 20 feet away from her. By this time, we still stood there stiffened, feet glued to the ground in complete shock with this eerie feeling consuming us. I remember thinking this was something pulled straight out of a horror movie. She got about 5 to 7 feet away from us, but we still couldn't move. It was in that moment I finally understood what people meant when they say they're literally frozen in fear. She turned directly towards us with her head still down and her face still covered. At this point, we finally got enough energy and will to run. We ran for our lives all the way back to my house. Panting, trying to catch our breath, we couldn't get a word out just yet. I remember having tears in my eyes with just the thought of her movement coming near us. We finally calmed down and had gotten some sleep. The next day, in the early afternoon, we got together again and all walked down to the park to make sure the coast was clear. And we just did, just for kicks because it was pure daylight, and we wouldn't be so frightened anymore if the lady was there. What we found on the bench was somehow even more disturbing than what we had experienced. A wild rabbit. However, this rabbit was no longer alive. This rabbit was cut directly in half, right down the middle. No blood was leaking from its body at all, as if it had been drained, but there was no decaying, and it was clearly a fresh kill. What was the hooded figure doing there? Why did it drain this rabbit of its blood? Was it even a person? It's been a decade, and I still think of this story sometimes and get chills and a bad feeling in my stomach. I wonder what she would have done if she had gotten any closer to us. I'm glad I won't ever get to know. When I was around the age of 6, my mom started to clean our church every week to help out. During this time, we were renting a farmhouse where me and my 2 older brothers experienced quite a few paranormal events. My parents never gave it the light of day due to them being pretty conservative in their thoughts and opinions. One day, my mom was cleaning the church. My brothers and I tagged along since my dad was working. While my mom cleaned, we decided to play hide and seek since the church was empty. Eventually, I was the seeker, looking for my brother, and I remember walking down a long hallway. Since the church was closed and my mom was just cleaning the room where the sermons were held, all the other lights were off except for emergency lights. When I was walking in the very dim hall, for some reason I felt the need to look up. And from that moment, I can't get the image of what I saw out of my head. There was an all-black figure around the size of a 6 or 7-year-old child. The figure was crawling on the ceiling, so I must have been looking at its back. Only, it had noticed me, so it had twisted its head around to see me. The face was blurry since it was dark, but I could make out an almost cartoonish smile staring at me. and I remember its eyes being not human-like at all. The weird thing about this is, despite how creepy I remember the figure being, my 6-year-old self was not scared at all. I remember thinking to myself, how did my brother get up there? Then I felt the need to leave the hallway. When I saw its face, I didn't feel my stomach drop, nor did I feel scared or threatened. It just felt like whatever I saw wanted me to just move along. To this day, I have no idea what it was. My brothers called me crazy and said there can't be any demons in a church since it's protected by God. The older I get, the more I don't really remember any other times we played hide and seek, but this one sticks out. After doing some research, I found out that church has been around since 1873, and there's a cemetery on the land as well. This is a very strange experience that I had as a kid.